Good evening and welcome to this special time of celebration and remembrance. I think most of you know me. My name is David Main, President and CEO of Mercy Health Services. I did want to start by first offering a special welcome to David, Hart, Barbara, and Richard. It's so good to have you here and you're part of the Mercy family. And to the entire Costa family and friends who are joining us today, our trustees who've joined us, and of course, dear friends of Joe who are joining us both here and those who are with us virtually. This is a special evening and it's wonderful to have everyone together. I consider it a true privilege and a great honor to share in this celebration with you. Joe Costa will be forever known as an extraordinary clinician, an individual with incredible moral character and someone with exceptional talents and abilities. Joe saw no one as merely an acquaintance, but he was endowed with a remarkable gift, really an astonishing gift of treating everyone, truly everyone, every patient, every family member, every colleague, every coworker, every person he passed on the street as a dear, treasured, lifelong friend. He just had this thing about him. Now, admittedly, I struggled a little bit with this event coming. I was struggling with the emotions of it a little bit. I talked with some of my colleagues in the intensive care unit yesterday, albeit briefly, and we're all everyone's in a different phase of how they feel about this. But tonight we are going to celebrate Joe. We are going to spend our time together remembering the Joe we loved and what made him so very, very special to our Mercy family. Now, we all have stories about Joe, and I came up here at maybe 5:30. I was with Richard and Barbara, and then others came, and I heard about 25 other stories, and I honestly needed a pen and paper because I wanted to write them all down because they are all just perfect in how they speak of Joe. But I thought I'd start off by sharing one of mine that I hope gives you a smile. Now, thinking about this event, Joe left an indelible mark on this organization. We are dedicating the intensive care unit in his honor tonight. After Joe completed his tenure as medical staff president, we traditionally affix a picture, it's an 8x10 picture, of that individual amongst a wall of all the other past presidents of Mercy Medical Center on the floor just below us in the Mary Catherine Bunting building. And this is just what we do. Well, forget about it. Joe wasn't going to have it. You're not getting my picture? I'm not putting up. Joe did not want to be the center of attention. He wanted no attention. He just wanted to hang low and do the amazing work of Joe Costa. Now look, here we are. There was a monsoon, did everything possible, and right now he is shaking his head saying, man, you got me. You got me. The only thing is if the sprinklers go off or something, but I think we're good. For so many, what endeared Joe to us was the personal concern he had for each of us, for our families, for the patients we care for. He was devoted to Mercy, and few things stood in his way of treating every patient as if they were family, truly family. As many of you know, within the walls of Mercy, there's a level of achievement that defines who we are. It pushes us beyond the goal of excellence. It inspires innovation and medical advances to raise the bar of excellence. We push each other. There's a force here that pushes us in the spirit of excellence. It motivates us each and every day to provide clinical excellence with an inherent level of compassion, dignity, and respect that is so special about Mercy. That it factor, that innate distinctive sense that patients and visitors experience when they walk through our doors is something special. We don't take it for granted. It's something more than special. It's extraordinary. And it's what we've come to know as Mercy excellence. Joe was the very embodiment of Mercy excellence. He lived every day. He lived Mercy excellence each and every day. He advocated and challenged us to settle for nothing less. Now, I want to share another story about Joe. This one, it speaks to his commitment of mercy, the care of our patients, the community of mercy, but also how we take care of each other. It was in mid-April 2020, early in the pandemic. Joe had worked an overnight in the ICU. He was scheduled to work an overnight in the ICU. And I, with some other colleagues, was working on the allocation of scarce resource policy. I'd set up a call for early that Saturday afternoon. And on that call was a colleague from Hopkins, our counsel from Gallagher, Valius, and Jones. And of course, I asked Joe to be on the call if possible. He was the chair of our medical morals committee and had considerable expertise in this. But I said, Joe, you're working overnight. I got it. We'll work through it, and I'll tag up with you afterwards. This was a different time, early in the pandemic, and those overnights were tough. He was caring for the sickest of the sick. It was a really, really, really tough time. So, that Saturday comes. It's time for the call. Joe's on it before I even get on it. Joe's on it, And, he listens intensely, shares his expertise. And we were talking about things that are unfathomable, unthinkable things on this call. As clinicians, they were unthinkable things. Well, we get off that call, and quite frankly, I'm in my basement, and I sit down, and I'm worried about our patients, our doctors, our nurses, our staff. And I kind of close my eyes, and I feel like the world was closing in. And many of us were feeling like that. 15 minutes later, I get a call, and it's Joe. And you might think he was calling to tell me an idea about the policy or anything. He wasn't calling about anything. He was calling to check up on me. He said, "Are you okay? David, are you okay? I'm just checking up on you. I want you to know, I talked with Wilma, and I heard it on the call. I just want to know, are you okay? I'm here to help you with whatever you need. I will do whatever you need." It was that simple gesture that exemplified who Joe was, in my view. A shining, beautiful example of humanity, and it was simply Joe being Joe. His selfless giving to others, knowing full well this guy was right in the thick of it, but he was a display and embodiment of humankind. He recognized that we need and care for each other, about being the good and decent human being that we all strive to be. That was Joe Costa. Now, Joe's story is much bigger than this pandemic. And it's much bigger than tonight. Joe's story will permeate here through the walls of Mercy forever. I'm just going to unveil this for a moment. We created this plaque of dedication, which will be placed at the entrance of our critical care unit, so that families might be comforted by Joe's selflessness and dedication to ensure the promise of mercy excellence is accessible to all. I'm not going to read the entire inscription, but did want to share a brief portion to remind us the bond we will forever have with Joe is deeply rooted in our commitment to uphold his belief in the power of mercy excellence. The plaque reads, "Dr. Costa was a special friend to the Sisters of Mercy, the people of Baltimore, and everyone he met. Joe modeled the values of dignity, respect, hospitality, excellence, and justice in all aspects of his life. He lived out Mercy's mission with a heart of compassion. Joe served the vulnerable and cared for our most ill and compromised patients. He gave our patients, and all of us, so much more than his medical expertise. He touched our lives with tenderness, hope, peace, and a wonderfully big heart." Thank you, Joe. We are forever grateful for your presence in our lives.
Good evening. My name is Rob Paymer. I'm the Executive Director of Bridges, an organization that's committed to the long-term success of students in Baltimore City, and a place where Joe spent a lot of his time when he was not here at Mercy. And what I have to tell you, which is also something that you all know, is that Joe was a very special person. In fact, he was one of my favorite people. He was at the peak of his profession. He was invested in his loved ones, committed to his community, always striving to be better, humble, no drama. This was Joe, just a rock-solid human. He was the type of person that I want to be, the type of person that I hope the students I work with professionally will be, the type of person I hope that my wife and I can raise. As you can imagine, it's quite an honor to be here speaking about Joe. Thank you to David Main and to Sister Helen for this honor. Thank you to David and all of Joe's family for this opportunity to speak about Joe and share some of my experiences with him. As you can also imagine, it's a little strange publicly speaking about somebody so humble and who worked so hard to stay out of the limelight. Somebody who referred to himself to me as a hospitalist, not head of the ICU at Mercy. Somebody who reminded me just to call him Joe every time I called him Dr. Costa. Joe, I hope you'll forgive me and the rest of us for admiring you in such a public forum for this evening. I met Joe 8 years ago via a friend, John Sutton, whose son, Brett, is here tonight. John was a mentor for Bridges and suggested that Joe join the program. Joe did join, meeting his students in 6th grade and spending 6 wonderful years with them. It's probably not a surprise to hear that Joe was a great mentor, and it also won't surprise most of you to know that there is a long list of ways that he helped at Bridges outside of being a mentor, ways that most people never knew. Arte was a Bridges High School student who we could only send to a music sleepaway camp in New Hampshire if we also found a way to provide him a part-time job when he got home. Joe and David provided that part-time job at their cafe. And Arte is now, 5 years later, instructor at that very music camp. Kyla was a Bridges College student who needed nursing experience as well as part-time paid work in a hospital. Joe found a way to get her into Mercy, and Kyla is now in her 2nd year as a professional nurse. Joe got his friends to play in a kickball tournament that we ran, God bless him. He was a member of our mentor committee, oftentimes showing up at the end of a night shift and never ever talking about being tired, just being excited to be with all of us and to help the program. He responded to every email I ever sent. Every email, whether it was to him or just to the broader community. And the email response always said something like, "I'm so proud to be part of this organization and keep up the good work." The guy never said no to an opportunity to help, and he always followed through. Terrible tragedy oftentimes is accompanied with incredible beauty. And it's hard to reconcile, and at the same time, it's the beauty. Tonight here celebrating Joe, building a friendship with his husband David, seeing the way friends and family have honored his memory at Bridges and here at Mercy. It's these things that help us get through the pain of loss. When I think of the beauty here, I also go to the story of a Bridges student who I know Joe is looking out for right now. This young lady started college at UVA last year, the same college Joe attended. She went there because she wanted to become a doctor. At the start of her year, she had some financial issues. Resources from Joe's friends and family actually helped us to meet some of those needs. And on top of it, this past summer, she improbably landed an internship at Mercy. There's absolutely no way this is all happening without Joe orchestrating this from above. And so, Joe, we thank you for all of this. And assuming you're okay with me sharing some of your secret acts of goodness, I look forward to continuing our work together with Ariana. May God bless Joe, David, and Joe's family, his friends, and all of you, his Mercy family. And may this critical care unit be a wonderful perpetuation of his spirit for generations to come. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to join many familiar faces as we honor my dear friend, Joe. I'm Denny Marshall. I'm an ICU nurse, and I've had the privilege of working with Joe for nearly half my career. Joe and I were part of the ICU team that opened the critical care unit on Bunting 9 nearly 11 years ago. When I was thinking about what I wanted to share with you this evening, I couldn't help but think how important the Mercy family was to Joe. He loved Mercy. He really, really loved Mercy. Even if he wasn't scheduled to work, or if there was a patient who needed special care, Joe would race back to the ICU to help out. He was always there. Joe and our ICU family enjoyed wonderful Christmas celebrations together. Joe, his husband David, and several of us enjoyed annual excursions to Deep Creek Lake. Those are memories we'll always treasure. Joe and David were as hospitable as they were generous. That gift of generosity was poured out in abundance by Joe. As many of you know, Joe loved to learn. He spoke at least 4 different languages, learned to play the mandolin, read books by the armful, and never failed to impart his knowledge about best practices in the care and treatment of our patients. Joe's generosity extended to very tangible levels of support, whether it was a coworker who was struggling to pay for an advanced degree, a member of our EVS team who suffered a personal loss, a homeless patient who needed new clothes and a good meal, or support for a local business or charity he believed in. Joe gave without hesitation or limit. A little more than a year ago, we filled Joe's ICU room to place our hands on the man we had come to know as our mentor, teacher, and friend. God was ready to call him home, and we had to be ready to say, "So long for now, dear friend." It was sad and heartbreaking, and yet I was confident Joe had given us what we needed to keep the ICU a place of compassion, a place of healing, and a place where dignity and respect are found. Joe surrounded himself with a team of nurses, doctors, and clinicians who believed were the ideal additions to our Mercy family. And so it's the ICU's Mercy family who will continue to carry on the works of mercy Joe so deeply believed in. We have Dr. Kelly Eimer as our new medical director. And the next generation of nurses in people like Stacy Trotman, Maggie Danini, Angie Cheney, Laura Carroll, and so many, many others. On the anniversary of Joe's passing, the ICU observed a day of remembrance. We invited Andy Cooper, a very dedicated and talented Mercy volunteer, to help us tool these small foil leaves into depictions of what we loved about Joe. And then went home and from our crude and not so perfect creations, reimagined the leaves to tell others the life story of Joe Costa. She shaped a leaf to reflect this love of music and his treasured mandolin, Another is filled with the books of wisdom and the lamp of knowledge. And even one is fashioned with the face of his beloved dog, Casey. Appropriately, Andy placed at the very center a leaf that's formed from hands on a heart. The sweet reminder that we were privileged to usher Joe into eternity, and that in turn, our responsibility is to always touch the hearts of others with kindness, gentleness, and compassion. Thank you.
All right, my speech is going to require a little bit of audience participation. Maybe. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Angela Brown, and Joe was my resident, chief resident, and pulmonary fellow back in the day when I trained at the University of Maryland. I was not the chief resident. That program is wrong, okay? So I just want to correct that right now, but it's all good. The last 12 hours of weather has been interesting, to say the least. Around 4 o'clock this morning, a loud thunderclap woke me from my sleep. Needless to say, I was startled and unable to fall back asleep. I could have let this situation upset me. However, I remember a friend of mine saying, "It's just the angels having a celebration." Well, I guess Joe and my mom were having a blast up there. We are gathered here to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Joseph J. Costa. Many of the people here in the room are a part of the Mercy family, a family which Joe was truly proud to be a member of. I come to you this evening to share a tidbit of what Joe meant to his first family, his University of Maryland family, where Joe trained to become the incredible physician that you all had the honor of working with. Do you know the definition of a triple threat? It means someone who's proficient in 3 important skills within their particular field. A Broadway performer is considered a triple threat if they can sing, dance, and act. Well, Joe was not a triple threat. In the words of Dr. Donna Parker, who was one of Joe's attendings during his residency, she referred to him as the Golden Triad. This is what she had to say. He was one of those few residents you were always hoping to have on your team. He worked incredibly hard, had terrific judgment, and required little supervision, AKA the Golden Triad. He was always doing the right thing and advocating for his patients to make sure others did right by them. He was friendly, funny, and real. In other words, he was a triple threat, or maybe the Golden Triad, which leads me into my next story. Do you all know that Joe was a superhero? That's why he was so buff beneath his LL Bean long sleeve shirt and the Ferragamo tie. You know he had pecs of steels and guns for biceps? Well, Dr. Doug Pogue, one of Joe's interns, provided me with this secret story. We would be on shift together at the VA, and Joe would be doing bicep curls in between seeing patients during our morning walking rounds. We all felt so lame for not working out and wondered how he had convinced the nurses to let him keep the dumbbell at their station. Now, if that doesn't prove that Joe was a superhero, I have more proof. A fellow comrade of Joe's, Dr. Courtney Houchen, stated that Joe was fearless. Here's what Courtney had to say. Joe was always the first person to show up to a code, whereas I was struggling to put on 2 gowns and eye shields before I would even walk into the room. And let's not forget about the 3 pair of gloves that I wore, which caused hand numbness because they were so tight. Meanwhile, Joe was taking care of the patient and setting the tone. I remember him saying, "Unless you're responsible for this person coding, then you need to step out of the room or calm down." So many people during the time of another viral illness were afraid of getting stuck and being exposed to infectious blood. They worried more about themselves, but not Joe. He was a real doctor, or in other words, a superhero. A superhero is someone who possesses ability beyond those of ordinary people, who typically uses his or her powers to help the world become a better place. Joe also had a funny sense of humor. Dr. Michelle Harkin remembers when Joe was her fellow in the MICU. Joe would pretend to be working on the computer during attending rounds, but was really looking up the names of prior presidents to see how many patients there were in the VA system with the same name. I think Joe had heard the attending's lecture on that particular subject at least 1,000 times, and he was clearly bored out of his mind. Dr. Mike Benitez can also attest to his funny sense of humor as well. Did you all know that Joe had a white Toyota pickup truck? Who in its room knew that Joe had a white Toyota pickup truck? All right, well, guess what? Did you know that he colored the 2 letters so it just said yo, as in Yo-ta? Joe also had a calming side to him as well. Dr. Janet O'Mahony can attest to that. And here's what she had to say. I was working alone in the VA screening clinic, AKA the new downtown VA ER. The staffing was, let's just say, interesting at times. I was a second-year resident working with 2 nurses, Mabel, who was like 100, and Kathy, who was in her 30s. These shifts were a scary experience, as you never knew what was going to walk through those doors. The closest experience attending physician was at the University of Maryland ER, which may as well have been far away as Australia, even though the VA and university were connected by a long bridge. But I diverge. Let's get back to Janet's story here, okay? So let's get back to that. Well, 100-year-old nurse Mabel wheels back an elderly man, and in a matter-of-fact voice states, he's cold and pulseless, but he's sitting up in the wheelchair and he's blinking his eyes. So I think he's still alive. She wheeled him into the code room, which was behind the nurse's station, and somehow we managed to get him on the stretcher. He turned out to be hypothermic and hypotensive, most likely from sepsis. So the 3 of us started lines, fluids, and pressors. Meanwhile, patients continued to stream into the screening clinic. I called the MICU, praying that they would have a bed. Fortunately, Joe, who probably had his hands full with patients in the MICU, as well as being the only other resident in-house supervising all of the other teams, can we say superhero one more time? Comes down to the makeshift ED and helps me out. Now, keep in mind, back in the day, the VA MICU resident typically did not see the patient, much less initiate a workup until the patient hit the unit. I remember hearing Joe say, "I'll be right there," and a sense of relief and calm swept over me. Key and Nurse Kathy worked on this gentleman in the screening clinic while Mabel and I moved on to the other disasters going on. I have another story. Dr. Francis Strain, AKA Skip, as we referred to him back in the day of our residency training, shared the following story with me. Joe never drew attention to himself. He was never boastful or conceited. Our residency program was brutally demanding and exhausting at times. As you're making that transition from a medical student to a doctor, you were hopeful that you would be able to learn the skills to do your job well. I was always observing residents, and I could easily pick out those who were surviving as well as thriving during those chaotic times. Joe was one of those people. There was never a time that he was not on his game or that he looked overwhelmed or stressed. Whenever an attending called on Joe out of the blue, he always knew the answer. I remember when my mom was in the Mercy MICU after her AAA repair. Joe told me that she was going to be fine and that he would watch over her that night. I specifically remember him saying that I should go home and get some sleep as I would need it. If it had been anyone else, I would never have believed them or trusted them. The last story comes from Dr. Carl Shanholtz, one of Joe's attendings. As the chief resident, Joe tirelessly advocated for the interns and residents. As a physician, Joe brought a dose of humanism to the bedside, which is easily forgotten in highly technology-based specialties. Naming the ICU after Joe is a fitting tribute. Joe's life reminds me of a verse from the Bible, Psalm 30, verses 11 through 12. And I'd like to share that with you in a story format. David faced many problems and confronted many enemies. He battled sickness and discouragement. At times, his burdens were so heavy that he wept all night. He felt dismayed as he made mistakes and experienced God's anger. And he knew how it felt when God hid his face. But everything changed when he humbled himself and called on the Lord. David asked God to hear him, to be gracious, and to be his helper. David discovered that God could change his circumstances. He could turn the moments of mourning into times of celebration. He could lift darkness and replace it with light. He could change hopelessness into hope. Because of this, David could be confident instead of fearful about his circumstances. He could become so radiant that he sang songs of praise. Instead of cursing his circumstances or wallowing in anguish, he could be filled with thanksgiving. How easily we become absorbed in the emotions of the moment, reacting to daily events when we become saturated with anger or bitterness, fear, or worry. But everything can change when we commit these situations to God. He can give us victory, no matter what the issue, no matter what adversaries or obstacles we face, no matter what is going on in the world, no matter how hopeless things may appear to our natural minds. Instead of being worried and afraid, we can trust in the Lord. He can turn around any situation. Today, allow God to turn your mourning into dancing. Let him fill your heart with joy and confidence. Don't allow the flesh or the world to dominate your life, but let God change you, renew you, and revive you. Don't be silent, but give him thanks. In the words of Cyndi Lauper, one of Joe's favorite artists, after my picture fades and darkness has turned to gray, watching through windows, you're wondering if I'm okay. Secrets stolen from deep inside, and the drum beats out of time. If you're lost, you can look, and you will find me, time after time. If you fall, I will catch you. I'll be waiting, time after time. Do not let Joe's death affect your fearlessness. Go out into the world and live and love and be fearless. It's what he would have wanted. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wilma Rowe, the Chief Medical Officer at Mercy Health Services. I first met Joe 25 years ago when I was an intern, a first-year resident, and he was a fellow. I might have gotten one of those famous eye rolls when I had done one of those things that interns do, but he was nice, and he said, "It's okay, don't worry about it." We were both young and just starting our professional careers. And in many ways, despite going down different clinical tracks, we both found our home at Mercy. I think, like many of you, that's why it seems so impossible to believe we won't see Joe walking through those doors after returning from one of his extraordinary excursions with David to Italy or Morocco or Vermont, or just see him walking in the door every day with that big smile on his face and that incredibly upbeat and kind greeting. But this last year has certainly reminded me that Joe's presence is very much alive. What he stood for, believed in, and wanted us to do. Whether he was on site or off shift, is to care about the people who look to us for hope and healing. Joe's role in the ICU often required an extraordinary level of compassion and empathy. He had an uncommon gift for helping and comforting families and loved ones as they faced those critical illnesses or difficult end-of-life decisions. Joe served the Sisters of Mercy and this institution with his heart and invested himself in every patient he cared for. He had an amazing moral compass and used it to guide the hospital, the critical care unit, the patients, and their families through many turbulent and very difficult times. Joe intrinsically relied on the Mercy values of dignity, respect, and excellence, and compassion to navigate his work. Our mission was Joe's mission. Each and every day he pushed us, challenged us, and charged us to do what was right. These were the principles that defined his clinical aptitude and what made him an exceptional doctor and leader. You heard that he was the chair of the Medical Morals Committee, and he took that role very seriously and often called himself the requesting service back with guidance on how to handle very difficult medical moral dilemmas. I was always struck by Joe's sense of the situation and his very insightful thoughts on next steps, always with the patient and Mercy's core values in mind, and always very practical. He had a knack for putting it all together in a very kind and compassionate way. Joe had a keen and colorful sense of humor, as we've heard tonight, and many of us remember. He never failed to be the face you wanted to see at the end of a long and difficult day, or at the start of a long and difficult day. His smile was big, but his heart was bigger. Thank you, Joe, for imprinting your spirit on our hearts.
Okay, sister, let's do this right.
Right.
When there's two people, it's more complicated. As many of you know, Sister Helen, Dr. Rowe, and many members of our senior management team soon after July 25th, we got together to decide what would be most befitting to honor Joe and all that he meant to our Mercy family. And almost immediately, and I do mean almost immediately, the decision to name the critical unit surfaced, and with unanimous agreement, we chose to name the unit the Joseph J. Costa, MD Critical Care Unit.
Now, you also know that the critical care unit is always busy and patient care always comes first. So for the actual unveiling, we had to depend on technology as well as the help of a lot of Joe's colleagues. So please watch at the actual unveiling with the help of the ICU staff.
Good evening. My name's David Hart, and Joe is my husband. First and foremost, thank each and every one of you for being here tonight, and to all the speakers, you gave us an extraordinary gift. It really, it means so much to me and Joe's family. The past year has afforded me a tremendous opportunity to meet people that Joe touched in one way or another. And many of these people I've never known before. Others I've known, but only to say hello. The blessing is this has allowed me to develop new or deeper relationships and friendships. And tonight I want to mention one of those people. Peg Benzinger is one of the folks I have been fortunate to get to know, and I want to thank her and her staff for putting this event together tonight, and also for your friendship. On behalf of Joe's family and me, I'd like to thank everybody who's here in person, and again, to those folks who are watching, especially everybody in Vermont. Thinking about what I was going to say this evening has occupied my mind for the better part of a month. And there are so many things to say about Joe. He was a complex person, and as I was struggling on how I would attempt to define him or share things that would speak to who he was, I was at the farm, and I was taking the dogs out. And generally the routine is to head down to the creek, get soaking wet, and then to throw sticks as we walk around the racetrack to the cemetery where Joe's been laid to rest. And at this particular moment, Joe's dog Daisy, sitting on his grave, the marble tombstone, very cool on a hot summer day, and I was kind of picking or deadheading the black-eyed Susans that just grow all over the place, and it struck me. And so I want to return to the word present. Why do I feel Joe's presence so acutely when I'm at the farm as much as I do at the same way when I'm here at Mercy? And it's not because his ashes are buried at the farm. It's because Joe occupied that space. He had hopes and dreams in that space. He struggled and laughed in that space, and he walked the same walk I was walking that day. He often stopped at the 2 trees in the field where his ashes are now laid. Joe, in some ways, is equally as present in my life today as before he died. Almost daily, I speak to someone who will share a story about Joe. They'll ask a question about Joe, or they'll seek advice about something related to Joe. And initially, I thought that over time this would diminish, but it hasn't. I think the continued feeling of his presence has everything to say about who Joe Costa was. And my hope for everyone here this evening is that Joe's enthusiasm for life and its challenges, his irreverent sense of humor, his worldview that each human life has dignity, and his incredible smile are as much present in your life as in mine. To honor his memory, and more importantly, to celebrate his ever-present spirit, I'd like Joe's dad and mom to come up just for a second. Joe's family and me are making a gift to Mercy's endowment, a gift specifically to benefit the critical care unit and the ongoing mission to provide excellent, innovative, and compassionate care. We do this joyfully, hopefully, and with profound gratitude. We look forward to celebrating Mercy's 150th anniversary as we approach the fall of 2023. And as always, thank you to the Sisters of Mercy, especially Sister Helen, and to you, David. Thank you for coming this evening.
Well, the final speaker of the evening is well advised to acknowledge a sense that everything that needs to be said has been said. Nevertheless, I'm going to offer one more short reflection and one more presentation. The reflection is based on a memory of Catherine Macaulay, the 19th century Irish woman who founded the Sisters of Mercy. The work she began has been carried on by the sisters and what I like to call our partners in mission. Many of you are here. And that work is now belongs to the responsibility of each of us. As she neared her death, Catherine made a rather strange request. She asked one of the sisters to bury her boots. Why? Perhaps because she didn't want anyone to feel the need to fill her shoes. I think that's a sentiment Joe Costa shared. Catherine told the sisters to walk their own path of fidelity to the mission, honoring the dignity of those they would be privileged to serve in their own day and time and place. Yes, educate. Yes, empower. Yes, provide hospitality. And above all, compassionate healing. And that's exactly what Joe did. And that's the legacy he wants us to continue. So Joe's telling us not to concern ourselves with filling his shoes, but with walking our own path, healing the sick, showing compassion to the dying, always, always lifting up those less fortunate than ourselves. That's how we honor his memory. And finally, one last presentation. I have the help of Peg Bensinger here. We have one of these for David to take to Vermont.
Thank you so much.
This one we're going to place in the ICU gardens on the 9th floor of this building. The wind chimes are inscribed with the Mercy values of dignity, excellence, justice, prayer, and hospitality. So when the breeze blows, we'll be reminded that Joe wants us to practice those values just as he did each and every day. And then at night, when the inner light turns the glass orb green, we can remember that Joe's presence is still here with us always, and be grateful once again for the imprint that he made on our hearts. So this is the one for
Thank
the
you so
fall.
much.
On behalf of Dr. Main, the Sisters of Mercy, Joe's family, thank you all for sharing in this special celebration. Please take time now to renew friendships, to make new friends, and then have a safe journey home. Thank you for coming. Have a pleasant evening. God bless you, each and every one.